Hello, it is Dr. DeJavo, and we are back. We are starting immunity, which is chapter 2 in our book. It is a fantastic chapter because the immune system is obviously a very important functional system of the body, and it is something that is challenged all the time. Little infections on the skin all the way to full-blown tuberculosis. So we're going to go over the basis of the stress effects on the body, infectious agents that get into the body, and how our body responds to those. Stress makes me sad. We're all stressed, aren't we? We're all trying to do a million things, a million ways. Sorry about that. And if only we could let a few things go, we might be a little less stressed. But stress is a huge effector of the immune system. What stress does is it stimulates our sympathetic fight or flight response. If you don't remember autonomic nervous system, the general gist of the autonomic nervous system is it is our automatic nervous system. It provides sympathetic, which is fight or flight, and parasympathetic, which is the calming, restorative part of our nervous system. So fight or flight example would be you're getting ready to fight, God forbid, and you're going to allow more blood to go out to your muscles to get more glucose out there so they have more energy. Parasympathetic is going to stimulate digestion and absorption from the GI tract, so we have foodstuffs for the future for those fight or flight responses. And those two systems work to balance each other out so we have the proper responses. We'll go over that when we talk about nervous system. When we're talking about physiological response to stress, we're going to have what's called sympathetic facilitation, which is your fight or flight response. Anything that you could think of that would happen during your preparation to fight would happen during this fight or flight response. Your breathing goes up, your heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up. You're going to release stored glucose, and we store it once again as glycogen. So you have glucose for energy. You're going to send more blood out to your muscles. You're going to send less to your digestive tract. So your muscles have not all, but a lot of glucose so they can fight or flight. Now, with that, we also release cortisol. Cortisol helps to perpetuate that response. Cortisol acts as a stress hormone and helps to stimulate those responses, and glucocorticoids, which are going to release stored glycogen, which is stored glucose for the use of that glucose for energy. And they have a nice little picture here. Don't panic. I'll explain what this is. In your brain, you're going to have the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and they work together to release hormones. That's all you need to know right now, okay? They're going to release, let's just say, stress hormones, which are going to come down to the outside of the adrenal gland, which is actually on top of the kidney, okay? This is even probably more complicated than we even need to get into. We have this little fatty lake gland that sits on top of the kidney, and it really is a huge organ that helps us in response to stress. So signals from the brain, we're gonna make this really simple. Signals from the brain come down to the adrenal gland on top of the kidneys, and you're going to release different hormones which will increase energy storage, mostly glucose, speed up metabolism, increase heart rate, breathing, and blood sugar. That's great if you're going to have a fight. You fight and then you're done. What has happened, unfortunately, in our society is that we're constantly stressed. So we keep sending the signal from the brain down to the adrenal gland. It keeps releasing these hormones, which release energy, speed up our metabolism, heart rate, breathing, and blood sugar. That's not good to do for a prolonged period of time. One of the main issues that's not good with is blood sugar. When you have free blood sugar in your bloodstream, it's very bad for your blood vessels. It's bad for inflammation in the body as well. The other thing about constantly having a high level of stress is that once we blow through all of the stored blood sugar, we'll start to tap into sources of energy from structural parts of the body as well, which can break down the tissues of the body. Bottom line is, learn to meditate, people, because it does help to lower these signals. It helps to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, and parasympathetic nervous system helps to calm us down and allows our bodies a chance to rebuild tissues and stores of glycogen. This picture, I'm not going to test you on it. It's a list of things that prolonged stress can do to the body. Once again, a quick flight or fight response is necessary if we're not only engaging in a fight, we also need the fight or flight response to exercise, to get out of bed, to function during the day. But if you keep chronic stress, you can have all these side effects in the body. Make note of it. Start meditating. Question time. Told you I wasn't going to say that anymore, sorry. During sympathetic facilitation, which is a fancy word for stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, the body is in fight or flight, true or false. Now, I want to mention at this point, all of these questions on the exams are not going to be this easy. I'm doing these questions pretty simply and straightforward, just as a way for you to continue to pay attention. Okay, moving on. Immune system, trying to stay balanced, trying to have a good level of immunity without it being too much. And I want to go over this concept while I'm thinking of it. When your immune system is developing and you're very, very young, your body will actually send out immune cells that learn the tissues of the body. So I don't know the specific name of them. I've read about them. I don't know the specific name of them. But these, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They go out and they seek through the tissues of the body. There's a specific word that's escaping me right now. Specific tissues of the body. And they go through the whole body and they go, oh, great. Okay, that's my skin. That's my liver. That's my heart. And that's not what they say, but you get what I mean. And your immune system learns the tissues of your own body. So that way, it doesn't attack the tissues of our body. If something foreign is introduced, it will attack it and hopefully get rid of it. That's healthy immune function. But alas, people who have autoimmune dysfunctions, something went wrong in their immune system that doesn't allow them to recognize their tissues as their own. And so their tissues or their immune system starts to attack their tissues, such as in rheumatoid arthritis. The body, for some reason, doesn't recognize those joints as its own. It goes awry, and it causes an autoimmune dysfunction where you start to attack your own tissues. Okay, so the immune system is great as long as it functions properly and doesn't become overstimulated and start to attack our own tissues. I'm going to, in your supplementals, you might want to pause the tape and go look at this, provide you a picture of the immune system, an overall picture of the immune system and the tissues that are in them. It'll be your lymph nodes, your lymph vessels, your spleen, bone marrow. All of these structures help to contribute to the immune system. There's other things too, such as your skin and your mucous membranes that I want you to keep in mind, but I'll try to find you a nice picture that shows you those structures. Now, the immune system, once again, is self-regulating, self-limiting, got to be able to distinguish itself from non-self so we don't have those autoimmune issues. When antigens are introduced from the environment, our body will launch an attack on that. There's a dual prong approach. There's innate. It is what you've been born with. Your general, immediate, non-specific protection against those antigens or those invaders. For example, the skin. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to list those in just the next slide or two. Now, adaptive or acquired is much slower, takes about 7 to 10 days, but it provides a specific response to a specific antigen. This is when we form antibodies to these antigens. This is why you are sick for about 7 to 10 days. It'll take about that long to provide a specific response to that antigen, and your innate defense barriers just aren't quite enough to fight that off. So innate defense barriers are non-specific. It's an immediate response. It's able to tell self from non-self, okay, but it can't tell between pathogens. Skin, mucous membrane, and there's a series of chemicals we're going to talk about. So the skin and the mucous membranes, I want to refresh your memory, and I spoke about this in a previous lecture. Your skin, obviously, has multiple layers of cells. There's also chemicals on the surface of your skin that provide an immediate response to infectious agents. It also has, I want to talk about its response to UV rays as well. The release of melanin to the surface of the skin helps to provide a barrier in that it'll protect from the sun. So just mentioning that at this point. Now, mucous membranes, I want to refresh your memory that the mucous membranes are the membranes that line the entire GI tract from mouth to anus. And that is basically open to the environment. We bring in substances in our foodstuffs. We breathe stuff in. You chew your nail, you're bringing stuff in. The mucous membranes have to have a strong response to protect us from those external antigens. And so it does that in several ways that we'll talk about once we talk about the structure of the GI tract, but that is a very strong part of our immune system, just as a sidebar. Additional blood-borne innate defenses include the inflammatory response. We're going to talk about each of these: pyrogens, interferons, and complement proteins. We're starting to get into those fancy words, but I'm going to break each one of those down. But before we do, let's do a quick question, just to make sure you're thinking. The skin contributes to our immune system. True or false? Inflammatory response. Now, the inflammatory response will include a series of responses from white blood cells. We're going to talk about the specific white blood cells when we get into blood, which I believe is the next chapter. Yes. So we'll get into the definitions of those, the red blood cells versus the white blood cells, and all the different type of white blood cells. So don't let this word basophil blow your mind. We're going to go over it in the future. But with the inflammatory response, we have mast cells, which are actually a variation of a basophil, which is a white blood cell, which we will talk about in the future. But these mast cells release histamine. Histamine is a potent vasodilator. It's going to open up, wherever we're having this inflammatory response, blood vessels, and allow more white blood cells to get to that area. Okay, so that area will look red, swollen, be warm, and probably painful, because you're going to release substances which will stimulate pain response in that area. So suppose, God forbid, we cut ourselves, or you get a thorn, or you get a splinter or something. Boom. So it goes into the skin. It penetrates that barrier, and then you'll start to, release histamine from mast cells, because now you have microbes in there. You'll dilate the blood vessels, bringing more blood to that area so white blood cells can escape the blood vessels. And this would be a capillary, which is the smallest blood vessel. And what happens is the cells at the capillaries, in response to this injury, actually will shrink a little bit. And so between them, these little white blood cells can sneak out. Okay. And one of these cells is going to be a monocyte, which acts as a phagocyte. It will actually, if you don't remember what I know we're moving into all these crazy words, so my advice to you is, if you don't understand something and I don't explain it well, which I'm trying my best to explain it well, pause the tape, look up the word, make a note. So we'll talk about the specific white blood cells that are going to sneak out, but know that they are phagocytic. And what phagocytic means is they're going to be like little Pac-Mans. They're going to come in and eat up these microbes. So hopefully these microbes don't get into our body. Okay, and you could see that's what this little guy is doing right here. Okay, now lymph vessels will also help to remove poisonous substances. You put them into lymph vessels. Those will go to where lymph nodes are. And in lymph nodes, we're going to have aggregates of white blood cells, which will help to fight off infections as well. Okay. The final step that they're showing, is the phagocytes. They repeat that. That's weird. I didn't realize that. Okay. Now, the other thing that'll happen is you'll flush this area with fluid from your capillaries, and that fluid is going to have to either be reabsorbed back into capillaries or back into these lymph vessels, so we can decrease the swelling in that area once things have been cleaned up. We'll have a repair in this area as well. We'll talk about that when we talk about tissues in the future. Basically, you're going to, I can talk about it briefly. You're going to lay down fibrin, which are little fibers, which will help to heal this area. Those fibers also can help to form clots. Once a tissue heals, these same phagocytes or monocytes will come back in, eat up the dead tissue, and your body will start to regenerate new fresh tissue to replace the damaged tissue. It's a real quick rundown of healing tissues. Okay. As always, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Now, another step to this non-specific response of immunity is pyrogens. Pyrogens are cool. Okay, pyro means fire, and what these are fever-producing molecules released by macrophages. Macrophages are like the Pac-Mans in our body that help to eat up viruses, bacteria, and dead tissues of the body. So these pyrogens are produced by the macrophages. It's sent to the hypothalamus, which is in the brain, and the hypothalamus helps to regulate our temperature. These pyrogens say, hey, there's an infection, crank up the heat, and that increase of heat increases metabolism, which increases healing and increases the macrophages, providing that phagocytosis and eating up substances that shouldn't be in the body. That being said, severe fever can be life-threatening, and let me tell you why. If we get a fever that's above 105, 106 in adults, or you can see the list that I put together for you for infants or under, and I'm sure this varies a little bit. These are general guidelines. If the fever gets too high, we can actually start to destroy enzymes in the body. And enzymes in the body help to facilitate all chemical reactions. This is something we do not want to happen. This is why we watch temperatures so closely in adults as well as infants. We don't want to increase body temperature too much. We'll start to break down the enzymes of the body. We can't perform chemical reactions. And as you can probably figure, chemical reactions are our whole physiology. So we can't do that to our poor little enzymes. Interferons are little proteins that are released from virus-infected cells that bind to other nearby uninfected cells that will actually prevent that viral replication in those uninfected cells. That's a pretty cool little thing there. You know, it's like the dying wish of that poor dying cell that's being taken over by the virus. So when the virus does get to that cell, they're unable to replicate and take over that cell's DNA. Pretty cool little step there. Complement proteins are very complex. We're going to keep it simple here. These are plasma proteins that help to enhance our antibodies or our body's response to the antigen. Okay? There's multiple roles. There are several different types. We're just going to go over the generalized idea of it because, as you can imagine, it could get very complicated. So some of the roles that it plays in our immune system is it will attack the bacteria itself. It will actually attack the bacteria, provide holes in the bacteria, water flows in and the bacteria explodes. And then our macrophages will come in and eat it up. It'll cause vasodilation to the infected area. So we will open up those blood vessels, we'll bring more blood to that area. There's an initial contraction of blood vessels, excuse me, but then the longer effect is to dilate blood vessels to that infected area. So we can flush the area out, bring more white blood cells to the area, and allow phagocytes to come in, or macrophages to come in to eat things up. Now, chemotaxis is the process where complement proteins will actually send proteins out into the bloodstream and tell the immune system that there is an infection in that area, and it draws white blood cells to that area. It's a pretty cool process. So complement proteins, there are several of them that provide multiple roles, but all of the roles have that same response to attack that infectious agent and to try to fight it off as best as our body can. And we're going to wrap up this little segment with a question. So, innate defenses, and this brings up a great point as you start to take questions in this course and other courses. Read every word. I was nice and I put exclamation points there. Innate defenses do not provide which of the following functions? So innate defenses we're talking about. Innate defenses. I'm trying to get you to really look at these questions. A, antibody creation. B, increase in body temperature. C, vasodilation to allow immune cells to get into the infection. D, chemicals to draw immune cells to the infection. E, all of the above. Do your best to answer that. And I am going to wrap this video up, and I will talk to you in the next video. Thank you very much.